Hello there, I'm Carol Omar Behan, a video in the series Between the Realms, welcoming you back, those of you who have seen other videos that have been appearing here now for a couple of months. And this one is falling in between the full and the new moon for the reasons that it is devoted to the topic, the incredibly important topic to you and me and all of us, of water. And I'm undecided as I make this whether it will be given the title Healing Waters or Living Waters, but it will most certainly have the Water is Life, Mni Wičoni. So I am coming to you as I always do from Light Spring Glen. It is a rainy day, rain that we could use. The water levels are somewhat low. We didn't have a snowy winter, and like any area that has a snowy season, it is snow that goes into the ground, its water content, and feeds the water table. So we could use some more because we didn't have as all that much snow. We had kind of moderate. I guess I won't try to quantify it beyond there. And the water of this land here where I look out and the view I can tell you about, actually the sun has decided to come through, and there may well be a rainbow if we were to go on outside and have a look. And I'm reminded sometimes that rainbows can't exist without both sunshine and rain. But the water of this land, to go back to what I was saying, is flowing in, it's the watershed in which I am living, in which I live, is in the upper Chesapeake Bay watershed. The particular small watershed, because they're nested one in another of the ones on the very edge of a watershed all the way to the encompassing one, which for me is the Chesapeake Bay. I am in the Willow Brook watershed. I have a map of it out on my kitchen wall. It's about, I think, 10 miles long and 3 miles wide at its widest. If I go up the hill, and there's some huge, beautiful ponds at the top of Richardson Hill, on which I live, I am at the edge of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And as you go down the other side, you follow Trout Creek that goes into Cannonsville Reservoir, and that eventually goes into the Delaware River and the Delaware Bay watershed. So when I arrived here, so I'm going to be telling you some stories about water, my experiences with it, and what I think they are saying to all of us. So a bit of a backstory about those ponds. And the day I first came here to see this beautiful property and to adjusting a little of my multimedia here, I was so excited about the water in this land. And in the spring of this year, it is really singing through all the little brooks, and it goes out through the pond that's right behind the house. I'm looking out at a pair of wood ducks. Oh my gosh. If you have never seen a wood duck in person, look up a picture of it because they're absolutely wonderful. So they're checking out my pond in case they might consider it a place to have a nest someplace not far. Fingers crossed. So the day I came up to see, I knew there was a waterfall. I knew there was at least one pond. Turned out there were two, all kinds of little springs and streams. So after we had a look, my realtor helper and me, thank you, Barbara, I hope you see this, we took a drive around the neighborhood, and we drove up the hill past these two amazingly beautiful, huge ponds, almost little lakes, and we saw the sign, Sydney landfill Superfund site. Well, that kind of brought us up short, and we checked out that story. Because I have other stories to tell, I'm going to try to make this quick. Indeed, my property borders a landfill site, and it was damaged, the beautiful land here, by a landfill that had accepted waste products of an aerospace industry located here in Sydney, and heaven knows it it was part of the economy of Sydney. It still is, but they no longer are polluting anybody's land. But the water took the biggest hit in Trout Creek, I mentioned it earlier, which was an award-winning fly fishing stream. Some years back, I'm going to think it's the late 80s, early 90s, and fishermen coming up into the Delaware watershed and up into these little streams where fly fishing was said to be amazing. Fish were turning up dead. Well, the investigation began, the discovery of what was going on with that landfill, and it's leaking these toxic wastes into the water, and the aquifer was discovered and addressed. You probably know about landfill sites, Superfund sites, I should say, and the process was corrected. So, without telling you whether the watershed seems healthy now to me. The wood ducks are here. The water that comes down, there is these beautiful ponds. Their outlet comes down into my streams, into my pond, off down through Light Spring Glen to Willowbrook, and off it goes. It seems, and I believe it is healthy now. There are frogs. They were singing to me last night, the first night of spring that I was hearing them. It was pretty amazing. So that particular healing of waters was addressed. And I'm going to take you now to an update on a story about water and people's concerns about it in this news story, and I think it's one you'll recognize the name of. Last week, amidst all the other stories going on in the world that center on the coronavirus and all that's happening there, and heaven knows that's a pretty gripping situation at the very least. But last Wednesday, this is what happened. A bit of good news for a change. On Wednesday of last week, a federal court issued a major ruling in favor of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe's legal challenge to the Dakota Access Pipeline. Ringing a bell? The D.C. Court of Appeals found that the Army Corps of Engineers violated federal law in giving the pipeline a permit to cross beneath the Missouri River at a spot just north of the Standing Rock Indian Reservation, whose residents say the pipeline poses an ongoing threat to their drinking water, sacred sites, and way of life. There will be, as a result of this action, which has taken the pipeline folks by some surprise, the Army Corps of Engineers is now being required to do a much more substantial environmental impact study. Now, the pipeline is carrying oil under that the Missouri River and also a lake that is the water supply of the Standing Rock Sioux. Unless you have been living under a rock, you certainly remember 3.5 years ago the incredible protests that were taking place there, not just there but all over the country, and that ultimately the pipeline did go through. There is always the danger of pipelines leaking. There is the huger danger of what extractive industries of oil and coal, which is somewhat minimal these days, and fracking. Don't get me started about fracking, except for the fact that I live in a place, New York State, where fracking is banned. We hope to codify that soon and make that even tighter restriction. I could do a whole video on fracking or anti-fracking, which is what I was a part of before I came here, in which I saw to success in New York State with all the other fractivists with whom I was connected, and it was quite a triumph. So there has been this calling or pulling in the reins for the pipeline situations and Standing Rock, Sioux, and the protesters, the water protectors, and I believe I'm going to put a photo of their beautiful symbols as the photo, the static photo on this video. So I intend to do that as well. So there are a couple stories for you, and this one literally taking place now amidst all of this, so that there may well be an opportunity to pull the reins in. Maybe that's the best way to say that now. And for the Standing Rock Sioux to have some relief from, to stop the pipeline's activity, for one thing, because, quick side note, that one of the things about fracking is the incredible threat to aquifers caused by the fracking process itself. But that's beyond the scope of what it is I'm talking to you and wish to talk to you about today. I do want to include a quote I wrote down here that I found important to the topic of this water, healing water, living water, water is life. LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, a spokeswoman for, I believe, the Standing Rock Sioux. I apologize if I have the wrong group in which she is a member. But during the Standing Rock process, this quote of hers: "We are the river, and the river is us. We have no choice but to stand up." As well they did, as well as so many of us did. Possibly those of you watching us, there may be some of you who went to be a part of supporting them in that very brave and passionate water protectors, water warriors, earth warriors. Yeah, stories and stories, and some things I want to go back to in my own situation around water and things I have worked in protests for, in addition to fracking, but something that relates to where we literally are in the time frame of the COVID-19 crisis, the pandemic. I mentioned in the last video, you might, if you saw it, remember that I said I was going to come and do this video, and one of the things, since it was going to be about water, was to have you consider, as we are using water to cleanse our hands, to prevent, to bring health to ourselves, that you think of it as honoring water as you do it each time. So I'm going to just reflect back on that for just a minute. Certainly what's been going on in these weeks, and it's going to go on while there is this quiet time we're all in, self-quarantined as we are, a time of reflection, as some people are using this time as a sort of retreat, and I think there's a lot to be gained from that as well. Apart from what we're doing to help stop the spread of this in flattening the curve, as it said, and all of that, there are other gifts of this time that I know that we are being presented to us and that we can take advantage of. A huge gift is to Mother Earth herself. Because without all of this hustle, bustle of the production end of things and the travel and all of that we're doing, Mother Earth, and I'm absolutely sure you've seen references to this already, Mother Earth is getting an incredible respite from all of our human activity in so many ways. And the stories coming out are of the pollution clearing over China, where it first registered. There are pictures from space which show the clearing of the pollution, of the air pollution. Someone was telling me just this weekend photos that are coming out of Los Angeles as smog lifting. Of course it would. There's no cars on the road. How wonderful is that? In Venice, the canals, and this was an early story, the canals, without all that traffic on it, the water is clearing. It turned out to not be true. The dolphins were seen in it, at least at that point, but there were fish and other life forms, that swans and other animals of the water, creatures of the water that were coming back to the waters. A very heartening indication that water was healing, that the air is healing, that the earth is finding a time of healing. It is to that point of earth giving an option to heal that I want to tell you the bigger story, and it relates so much to why it is I'm even here talking to you today. I mentioned in the video, because he's going to be brought in here, the work of a man, and his work was part of the story I'm about to tell you. And behind, if you've been glancing over my shoulder, other than occasion, I think some of you might be spotting the dragonfly, which is a water creature. Such a beautiful one. No dragonflies yet, but they'll be here before too much longer. I'm looking forward to that. Dr. Masaru Emoto. And I'm going to show you the book of his that I have because it will tell you certainly something more about him. It is this particular one, and there are a number of books by him. The Healing Power of Water. And we know it for ourselves at the present time. Isn't that a beautiful? And you might know about what that crystal representation is. The healing power of water we're using right now in all of the hand washing we're doing. Dr. Masaru Emoto, I hope I didn't lose this note, he left the world in 2014. He was born in 1943. I do think I have that accurately. Sometimes I've got notes in several papers. I try to consolidate it on one sheet. In 2004, so I'm going to bring him back in. No, okay, let me switch it around. Dr. Emoto discovered Dr. Emoto proved, there are a number of ways you can approach this. The healing power of water and water's consciousness. Probably more the latter, water's consciousness. And as I mentioned to you on the video prior to this, water is, unless it is chlorinated or it's been all stopped up by pollution or dams or anything. I mean, the water that's flowing through this pond out here and rising from the springs, thanks to the Superfund site, is certainly part of it. But this is living water. Living water that is without pollution, that is without obstruction. And it is this living water that he had and came to discover its own awareness of communication from us to it. And I can tell you the vice versa of it in the story I'm about to tell you. But essentially what he did was discover that you could, as in my water glass here, where I've put the word peace, that I can, in thanking and giving love and gratitude to the water in this word peace, that water is receiving the consciousness of the word and the sense of peace. In freezing water with these messages, the messages to water, it to us, he would, in micro, oh my gosh, I read a little bit about him this morning, that water with different messages to it made this, like definitely a snowflake, that's what these are, would produce these and show and reveal their beautiful constructions. This one is water that was given the message of a Buddhist prayer. I'm going to just hold that still for you. Maybe I should take a picture of this and put it up front. This may be new to you in terms of who this man is, but I hope you've seen these beautiful images. The one on the cover, I looked to see quickly what it was, and I couldn't actually find it. But as far as it, and he was the editor of this collection of pieces about the healing power of water. The healing power of water, quite extraordinary. You've heard me speak about the healing powers of the waters of Chalice Well. Again, if you've seen these videos prior to that, to this one. But the story I want to tell you is not of Chalice Well. It is something that came to my experience in such a vivid way. And I'm going to read you a little bit of the end of the story from the book that is my collection of experiences in my own journey, answering Avalon's call, which is Glastonbury, the mystical odyssey of an earth healer. That would be me. And the earth I attempt to work, the part of earth I work with the most in terms of healing is water. So there it is. So in upstate New York, there is a confederacy, or there certainly was when the first of the settlers of the people came from Europe to settle in this land. They found in this part of the world, in upstate New York, a confederacy of 5 tribes, 5 groups of Native Americans called the Iroquois, better called the Haudenosaunee, their name. They were along the Mohawk Valley all the way to Buffalo, all the way through upstate New York. And the tribe in the middle, the group in the middle, were the Onondagas. They were the keepers of the... Oh gosh, I hope I'm not making a mistake, and I'll put it in the notes and apologize if I am. The keepers of the Central Fire and keepers of the Sacred Lake of Onondaga. Onondaga Lake had with it, in addition to all of that, the gathering place of the 5 nations, they had salt ponds along the edge that were, of course, very important to the native peoples and the indigenous peoples of this part of the state. And as European settlers arrived and came to know this, they began extractive processes of their own, and it went on and on and on. Onondaga Lake, over the centuries, became one of the most polluted lakes through industrial, what's the word I want here? Industrial waste. One of the most polluted lakes in the country, if not the world. And this lake that had been sacred to the native peoples was essentially a dead lake. By the time I came along in 1949, it was a dead lake. Absolutely. It's a tragedy in so many ways. Into the 60s, and the first Earth Day, I was in college for that. And I want to mention that, given where we are at the end of March, we'll be coming up on the 50th anniversary of the first Earth Day. April 22nd, 2020 will be the 50th anniversary. So a bit of a segue, not a segue, but a side note here. We just passed in March 22nd, the UN-sponsored World Water Day. So we're kind of sitting right in the middle. It's a good time to be making this for you. What was my other note about this? Okay. The theme of this year's World Water Day was water and climate change. So you can see how we're weaving a couple of very important pieces together here, I would think. So in 2004, backing up from my own time, there were a group of people that organized themselves to bring a spiritual healing, bring the power of spiritual healing and the work of Dr. Emoto, expressing love and gratitude to water, to bring healing to the lake. And I joined forces with an amazing group of people to hold this Onondaga Lake Peace Festival on October 11th of 2004. So as I worked with them through the spring and summer as we organized this, one of the things we most intended to do that day was to gather waters brought by individuals to gather into what we used was a beautiful large basin, very humble one. It's actually here in my house, and have people express their love and gratitude towards water. Other things happened around the day in honoring of the lake. We were at the north end of the lake at Long Branch Park, and there is a sacred Indian site there. And if you're ever able to come to this place, I hope you will be sure to take opportunity to go to this part of the lake, the northern end of the lake. That's where we held the festival. We held a lot of things. We held children's activities. We had music offered by any number of wonderful people. We had informational booths. We had some sort of picnic or food trucks or whatever it was then, 2004. It might not have been a food truck, but it was a gathering of people to honor the lake. We began the day because Long Branch Park looks down the whole lake. And we did the whole day ceremonially. And yes, we did invite Onondaga folks to join us, a few did. And we called upon the spirit of the lake to say that we wanted to honor her this day and that we were raising healing energy for her. I had the honor of overseeing the gathering of the waters. People had sent to me, because I'd advertised that I was doing this, vials of water that they had blessed themselves. And it was a matter of, and you may have done this yourself in other occasions in water healing and honoring ceremonies, to express to water your love and gratitude and thanks. People had sent me, and it was amazing to collect the packages arriving in the mail, little vials of water from waters that were special to them, that they had visited, even if it had only been the water from their tap. And even if that was something from a city water supply, it still was sacred to them in the sense of it was their water supply. But waters came to me from, people had gathered them in Egypt. Someone had gathered water from somewhere in Siberia, I believe it was. I mean, it was a while ago, so I'm not remembering. And in humble places like a favorite pond or a lake or a stream. So I brought these waters in all their little containers with me that day, and we set up a stool. Actually, it's like the one this actually sits on. The basin sat there, and I'll read you now of how that proceeded in actually the end of the day. So, all day the humble basin received people's water offerings. Oh, and I should probably say that if you hadn't brought something with you, although it had been on the outgoing advertisements, there was a bucket. It was very humble, but so incredibly, it was humble but powerful. That's probably the way to put it. So people could come to this stool in the basin, and if you didn't have water with you, you simply dipped up, because it was water out of the lake, dipped out that morning, and a cup, and you spoke your thoughts to the water, love and gratitude, and then you added it with your intentions doing that. It was my privilege to oversee this all that day, standing nearby to answer any questions, but mostly to hold the energy of this beautiful ceremony. It was one of the most wonderful things that I've had the chance to do. All day the humble basin received people's water offerings, each one infused with blessings and messages of love and healing for the water. Late in the afternoon, the much blessed water was poured carefully into a 5-gallon bucket, and this was brought into the center of our closing circle. There were about 100 people. We held hands around it, sang a last blessing to the gathered water. Then it was carried down to canoes awaiting. There were 3 of them. And people in each of the canoes went out, the water being in one of them, and it was carried out into the lake and offered to the Lady of the Lake. And we closed our day that way with this offering to her of our love and gratitude. With everything finished, at last, I drove off into the evening dusk, somewhat weary from the long day, but so marvelously elated. I was driving along the parkway on the lake's east shore when an unmistakable summons came. Find a place to stop and come down to the water. Moments later, a pull-off appeared, and I turned into it, shut off the engine, and got out. It was only a short walk down to the water, not yet too dark to see my way clearly. I had no idea what to expect, only thrilled at what was unfolding. Then I stood at the water's edge, the peaceful lake stretching out before me, mirroring the moving golden string of car lights driving along the highway on the west side. There was a stirring out on the water not far from shore. Transfixed, I saw a shadowy shape rising and begin moving towards me. Now in total awe, I knew at once it was the lady of the lake. It was she who had called me to stop and come down to the water. She came to within perhaps a dozen feet of the shore and stopped, hovering above the water, clearly pleased that I had come and that I could see her. I felt more than saw her smile and nod to me. I received her thoughts, a gentle message of thanks to all of us who had gathered that day and for what it was we had done and created together. Then, unmistakably, these words were clearly spoken to me in the dusk. We are healing one another. We are healing one another. Please share this with the others. I told her I would, and again she nodded, smiled, and slipped away into the night. I remained there at the water's edge for several long moments, suffused with the grace of this visitation, then made my way back to the car and drove home. This time that we're in, and I did tell the others. I'm telling you now, for maybe a couple of reasons. Not at all that it's the work I did. I was given the opportunity to be a part of this and to be in concert with other people who were bringing healing to this water. And the profoundness of her telling me that we are healing one another speaks to what's going on now and what the opportunity we're being given to do is. There is so much that has been perpetrated, sometimes unconsciously, but other times very consciously, perpetrated of damage to this beautiful, beautiful earth. The climate crisis that we face is real. There are people awake to it, working hard, as I'm sure a good many of you are, as I deliver this message to you today. The earth seeks our interaction, not just through loving her, but through her bringing her healing to us as we bring ours to her. It is an empowerment, an opportunity for which is being presented to us in these days of reflection and quiet that you can dive into even more deeply. How can you be of help, of service, of healing in ways perhaps you've not been aware of, or those that you're involved in, how can you be fortified to continue and to do them? It is a discouraging time that we're in. It is a scary time we're in, and yet it is a time in this crisis of opportunity to bring change to bear. Change that can begin to shift things away from the precipice we find ourselves on with our environment. If in the humble way that we sought to bring healing to this, and oh my gosh, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you where we are in 2020. partly, apart from her appearance that day, is that this lake, a super fun sight now, the eagles, bald eagles, have begun to winter on the lake again because there is enough of a fish population returned, of health returning, as fragile as its level is right now, that are bringing a recurrence of enough of the fish to support eagles there for their wintertime roost. It's exciting and dramatic, and such a sign for all of us that the work we are attempting to do, that we are working together hand in hand with nature to bring about this healing. So without letting this beyond a length that is hard to sit through all the way, even with your possible interest, and I'm assuming and assured that if you've come this far, your interest is that indeed, is that you use this time of quiet and retreat to go into your own beautiful depths, to know more about what it is that you can bring to the earth in all of these ways of helping us to heal one another. Nature seeks us. Reach out to her through the water, through the trees, through the land. Way back in the first of the videos, I offered a blessing that can be shared at the dawn and dusk of each day, a blessing to the land, because she is always awaiting us to return, to turn to her and to be with her. So may you find some time to do so, affecting this healing not only for yourself, not only for the world, but for all of us. So I'm going to leave it there. Thanking you for your attention to this video. Thanking very much those of you who are liking and sharing this, and for subscribing to Between the Realms. It's not the last message necessarily that I want to leave with you, other than to say thank you so much once again. I always need to put in a little plug because it helps spread further the messages of these videos, which I know I'm being called upon to share with you. And today it was certainly about how water is healing. We are healing the waters. Water is life. Mni Wičoni. Many blessings to you. And find out what watershed you live in, and to begin to be aware of it. It's a fun thing to know. What is my watershed? See what it is and enjoy knowing more about it. Thank you so much. Take good care. There'll be a video on the full moon in another week. Bye for now. Much love. I'm trying to stop this with my mouse. It's not going to work. So on that note, take good care. Love from Light Spring Glen.